Thanks for listening to our daily podcast. If you love what you're hearing and you want more, you can get all 3 daily hours ad-free and on demand for less than $3 per month. Go to michaelmedved.com and subscribe today. We have a special deal right now, 50% off an annual membership. Our program covers all the current controversies in the news with my independent and uncensored views. Become a MedHead member today. Find out more at michaelmedved.com. That's michaelmedved.com.
From pop culture to politics, this is the Michael Medved Show.
And another great day, another great week, in fact, in this greatest nation on God's green earth. It is a great week that leads up to the Christmas holiday. And there is a new poll by the Gallup organization on Christmas where how many Americans say they're going to actually be celebrating the Christmas holiday? You will be surprised. It does indicate that we may have had a war on Christmas some years ago. Christmas won. I mean, there's a very clear victory there. There is not a connection that I can think of between the Christmas holiday and the various messages from that holiday about this country and about who we are and about what Americans want. There's very little connection between that and the Epstein Files. Except there's a revealing article from across the pond in the IB Times, the International Business Times, UK. And they write the long-awaited disclosure of the Jeffrey Epstein investigative files has arrived, but the resulting digital fallout suggests the public feels more deceived than informed. Uh-oh. Instead of the transparency many had campaigned for, the release has sparked a firestorm of criticism over the heavy-handed use of the literal black pen. Over 100 pages from the Epstein files are redacted, leading many to wonder what was the point of releasing them in the first place. The move also sparked various rumors as to why the Department of Justice decided to hide most of the files. The headline to this piece says, "What was the point? Netizens outraged as 90% of the released Epstein files are redacted." There are just a lot of faces that are blacked out by the redaction pen, I guess you could call it. President Trump was very determined to knock down Joseph Biden because of the use of the auto pen. Well, the redaction pen is a problem for the president. Following the passage of the Epstein Files Transparency Act, the Department of Justice began releasing thousands of documents on 19 December. This legislative mandate required the government to disclose unclassified records, communications, and investigative materials related to the late sex offender. The Trump administration stated that the release was intended to provide closure and to demonstrate a commitment to government honesty and integrity. Unfortunately, most of the pages were kept hidden, and the mass redaction immediately raised eyebrows on social media. Now, if they are accurate that 90% of the released files are redacted, that they have things crossed out on them, that's 90% of 95,000 documents that supposedly have been released, but they're not really released if 90% of them are redacted. Before the release, sources told CNN that the DOJ had to redact thousands of pages of files related to Jeffrey Epstein for a reason, citing, quote, sensitivities of executive and legal privacy, victims' protections, and other concerns. Well, of course, if you are featured in some of these photographs and some of these documents that link you to one of the most notorious people in the world, a truly diabolical figure was Jeffrey Epstein. if you were connected in any way with this, of course you want it redacted. It says the Justice Department lawyers reportedly worked on the files beginning on Thanksgiving week until the day of release. The day of release, of course, was this last Friday. Epstein Files are full of redactions, and there's a drama alert. The social media speculation, they report social media speculation links redaction of Donald Trump. The lack of clarity has sparked a wave of new theories about the identities hidden behind the black bars. Many users are convinced that the redactions are a targeted effort to shield specific high-profile individuals from public scrutiny. Some are bold enough to suggest that the DOJ was hiding something probably related to Donald Trump, hence the mass redaction. This just confirms Trump is on them, one added. Another said, redactions equal photos of Trump. The interesting thing here is I wouldn't be so sure. One of the things that has been very dramatic about President Trump is he has been involved with all kinds of things that are undeniable, including, yes, the Access Hollywood tape, videotape. That was on tape. You can't deny it. He's saying it. Being found guilty of smearing E. Jean Carroll on the matter of what happened in the dressing room at Bloomingdale's. I mean, his 34 convictions on the blackmail, hush money to a porn star issue. I mean, one thing, and it hasn't mattered. He got elected president anyway. And would people really react differently in terms of the Epstein matter? I think that the people who believe that this is actually the decisive blow that is going to change everything for President Trump, I think that's wrong. They already have a poll just out today from YouGov, and it listed 13 adjectives that asked about the ones that Americans are most likely to use to describe Trump are bold, 48%, dangerous, 45% of Americans think Trump is dangerous, and corrupt, that's another 45%. The terms that Americans are most likely to say do not describe Trump are honest, 40% say no, he's not honest, inspiring, and no, it's only 36% who think he is inspiring. And so you have the 64% who think he is not. And then steady. 29% of Americans think that President Trump has stayed steady. And that might explain why 41% of Americans expect that Trump will attempt to serve a third term. Doesn't even say that he will run for a third term. He'll try to serve a third term. Far fewer, 14%, think he should attempt to do so. It's pretty astonishing when you have this president who is so divisive, and the number of people who would like to see him continue in the White House is 14%. Democrats, it turns out, are more than twice as likely as Republicans to think Trump will seek to serve a third term, 59% versus 25%. Nearly 1 in 3 Republicans, that's 31%, think that Trump should try to serve a third term. What percentage of Democrats think he should try to serve a third term? 2%. 10% of independents. Now, all of this doesn't mean that Americans can't unite on some aspects of our life together in this spectacular country. The Christmas remains a widely observed holiday in the U.S. This from the Gallup organization. What percentage of Americans say they are planning to celebrate the Christmas holiday coming right up. 88%. That's a unifying factor in this great country. And no, it's not true that there was ever a big group of people who were saying, no, you can't say Merry Christmas anymore. So how will people celebrate Christmas? The 88% who are planning to do so. We'll get to that coming up on the Ben Show.
With the kids jingle belling and everyone telling you be of good cheer. It's the most.
And this Christmas season, there is new information from Gallup that shows that Christmas is still popular and pretty much as popular as ever. 88% of Americans say that they're planning to celebrate the Christmas holiday. That's essentially unchanged from 90% who celebrated Christmas last year. And who knows, maybe between now and the 24th and 25th of this month, it'll go back up to 90 or maybe even above. The highest in recent years was in 2005, which is interesting. That was the beginning of the second term of George W. Bush as president. 96% said in 2005 they celebrated Christmas. Most who plan to celebrate Christmas this year say they are going to take part in secular traditions, such as exchanging gifts, gathering with family and friends, and decorating their homes. At the same time, fewer than in the past report incorporating religious customs, such as attending church or displaying religious holiday symbols. That would be displaying, say, a nativity scene instead of or in addition to a wreath. The holiday has broad appeal across demographics, says Gallup. About 9 in 10 older Americans celebrate Christmas, including 90% of those 35 to 54, and 89% of those 55 and older, while 85% of young adults aged 18 to 34 also celebrate Christmas. Consistent with prior years, a slightly higher percentage of white adults, 92%, than people of color, 82%, say they celebrate Christmas, but roughly equal percentages of men, women, college graduates, and non-graduates observe it, as well as married and unmarried adults. The rate is naturally high among self-described Christians. 96% say, who call themselves Christian, celebrate the Christmas holiday. But even a large majority of non-Christians, a group that primarily includes Americans who say they have no religious identity, but also a small proportion of those practicing other faiths, take part. So for non-Christians in this country, 77% still observe Christmas. The social aspects of Christmas remain strong. The church fades. The latest poll, which was conducted this year, just a couple of days ago, between December 1st and 15th, also asked respondents who celebrate Christmas whether they or their family engage in 10 activities strongly associated with the holiday, exchanging gifts, 96%, and getting together with family and friends, 95%, remain nearly universal Christmas traditions, largely unchanged from Gallup's previous measurement in 2010. Similarly, about 9 in 10 celebrants continue to say they will put up a Christmas tree, 90%, or decorate their homes in other ways. Now, I don't know if the 89% who decorate their homes in other ways. My wife loves decorating for any occasion, and we had this year in particular with a bunch of grandchildren, 6 of them, who live nearby us. There were very elaborate Hanukkah decorations, which is appropriate to talk about today because this is the last day of Hanukkah. Hanukkah is over at sundown tonight. That's meanwhile, in other religious news, there is a really thought-provoking and profound column by a friend of this show, David French, who has a very provocative title to his latest piece for the New York Times. And the headline says, "Christianity is a dangerous faith." And David French writes, "Religion is one of the most dangerous forces on earth." Now, David, who I know well and I'm very proud as a friend, is a deeply religious individual, a deeply committed Christian and passionate Christian who is extremely well-schooled in the New Testament and the Old Testament and deeply committed to his religious faith. But he writes, religion is one of the most dangerous forces on earth. If you have ever encountered true fundamentalists, you know why. When you combine eternal stakes with absolute certainty, it produces the kind of people who are happy to be cruel in the name of God, he writes. In fact, they can view their cruelty as a form of kindness if they treat you with decency. Doesn't that make you comfortable in your sin? It's important for them to take opportunities to confront people when you can. In other words, to tell people that they're wrong, often in the most strident of ways. How else will they understand the gravity of their own sin? To the fundamentalist, disagreement is proof of apostasy. But it can be even worse than that. If you're wrong, then you might lead other people into error, and that makes you dangerous. That's one reason fundamentalists of all stripes are often such zealous censors. A fundamentalist can see every person who's wrong as a kind of patient zero in a potential pandemic of paganism. That's a phrase that I hadn't seen before, a pandemic of paganism. And don't think for a moment that fellow believers are spared the fundamentalist ire. They're a chief target. They have no excuse for their errors, and they receive the most vitriol of all. The same principle, David French makes clear, can be applied to secular fundamentalists. Perhaps you've met them, the people who define themselves through their individual politics, who show a kind of sneering contempt for dissent and are very, very concerned with who is platformed and who is not. Now, nothing I'm saying, writes French, is original, relaying an observation that's been true since the first spark of faith in the human heart. There is a quiet, dark voice that whispers, "You are right. They are wrong. It is best for everyone if you rule." Now let's talk about the Christmas story, which has a very opposite message. How does that work out? We will get to that also as the Trump group celebrates the conclusion of the year. Do they have some remaining grounds for celebration? We will get to that and more, all coming up on the Medved Show.
Just like the ones I used to know, where the treetops glisten.
It was interesting is that we had a Hanukkah celebration for the last night of lighting candles last night, where we had our grandchildren over with us and our son. And Diane, for some reason, got on the subject of Burl Ives, whose voice you hear there, who for baby boomers, he was a figure. And he had a song that I know that when I was very young, before I could read, there was a song about a little white duck sitting in the water, a little white duck sitting in the water. And I'm not even sure what the song signified or what it meant, but it was interesting to hear my wife Diane trying to explain to our granddaughter Emily who Burl Ives was and why he was an important figure for little kids many, many years ago. In any event, part of that has to do with celebrating the Christmas holiday. He certainly had big best-selling vinyl record albums that were available with that music, like the music you were just hearing. And it fits in to some extent with some of the Christmas themes that David French writes about in his column in the New York Times, Christianity is a Dangerous Faith. He writes, after he suggests that ever since the first spark of faith in the human heart, there's a quiet, dark voice that whispers, you are right, they are wrong, whoever they happen to be. It is best for everyone if you rule. And then he says, now let's talk about the Christmas story, which doesn't illustrate that human spark, that first spark of faith that he's talking about. Let's talk about the Christmas story. Every year, like clockwork, writes David French, a series of debates breaks out in Christian America. When Jesus was born in a manger, did that mean he was homeless? When Jesus fled with his family to Egypt to escape King Herod's order to kill all baby boys in the region of Bethlehem, did that mean he was a refugee? And when his family entered and lived in Egypt until Herod died, did that mean Jesus was an immigrant? There was a separate nation state called Judea. And yes, he came back, which is the land of his birth. Does he get birthright citizenship too? Well, you can see why the debate matters, whether or not you are a believer. If the man Christians believe is the Messiah, part of the Trinity, the maker of heaven and earth, wasn't just human, but also a human of low social status in the ancient world, and never elevated himself to any position of power on the earth, then that has immense implications for believers who want to imitate Christ. If you can somehow distinguish the facts of Jesus' birth from the realities of the modern world, however, then you can push it away. It becomes merely an ancient origin story, a matter more of academic interest than anything else. I tend to think it's a waste of time to debate whether Jesus fits into any specific modern legal or cultural category. For what it's worth, David French writes, I don't think he was homeless. His family was on a trip, and there is no indication that they had no home at all. But I do think, says David French, he was a refugee by any fair definition of that term, since his family was fleeing religious persecution. It's a bit strange, however, to call him an immigrant when he fled to a different part of the same empire, that Roman Empire that we remember with as a very, very mixed blessing on the earth. My conclusions don't matter, though, says French. The core truth of Christ's birth is that when God became man, he entered the world in a posture of extreme humility and extreme vulnerability, and that posture never changed. Jesus, God made flesh, spent his life as a carpenter and an itinerant preacher. He proved so vulnerable that he was easily executed by the Roman Empire with only the tiniest band of followers still clinging to their faith. And if we who call ourselves Christians, David French writes, are to truly imitate Christ, then shouldn't we also place little regard on our own worldly status? Jesus told us to take up our own cross, not to nail others to that terrible tree. And then he concludes this way. My former pastor often used a phrase that has always stuck in my mind, the upside-down kingdom of God. I use it all the time as well. Yes, Christ is king, but of a very different sort of kingdom, where the first are last, and where you love your enemies, and where you bless those who persecute you, and where you sacrifice to serve your neighbor. And Jesus established the upside-down nature of this kingdom from his very first moments on earth. Conclusion, David French. When I think of the contrast between his life and ministry and the will to power that has consumed so many Christians, I'm reminded of the words usually attributed to Mahatma Gandhi. I like your Christ. I do not like your Christians. Your Christians are so unlike your Christ. Well, not in all ways and not at all times. And Christianity properly lived, David French finishes, Christianity properly lived is dangerous to Christians. It's dangerous to people who refuse to hate those they are told to hate, to people who refuse to oppress, to conquer, to exploit, even though they're told to conquer in the name of God. And this is actually goes to an aspect of the big TPUSA event that occurred, the first big national event for Turning Point USA since the murder of its founder, Charlie Kirk. And J.D. Vance, the Vice President of the United States, was prominently featured. And the event came along with an endorsement for the presidential race of 2028, which is still a ways away. But it's an endorsement from Erica Kirk, who's the new head replacing her late husband and much missed husband at Turning Point USA. There was a big speech by J.D. Vance along with that endorsement, and also some big disagreements involving people like Ben Shapiro and Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, and Steve Bannon, and more. We will get to that coming up on the Michael Medved Show. Also, the U.S., which is pursuing another oil tanker in international waters. What does this mean for the future as we come up to the new year and the holiday season? We will get to that and to more. David French, who I was just reading from, is available on part of our YouTube channel, which we'll talk about later. Coming up on the Medved Show. And on the Michael Medved Show, we have had many conversations with David French, whose column about the dangerous nature of Christianity, I think, is so thought-provoking and insightful and profound. And David is featured on our YouTube channel in conversation with me. The way you go to it is you go to YouTube, and then it is Michael Medved Official. That's the name of the account. And you can check out the conversations with David French. And while you're there, please press like, which I hope you do, and subscribe, and leave a comment. It's free. It's unfiltered. And it's where the conversation continues. We're posting videos daily on the Michael Medved Official YouTube account. Just type in Michael Medved Official in the YouTube search bar. On the Michael Medved YouTube channel, you can find the latest commentaries, the interviews, podcast episodes, various TV appearances, and more. Meanwhile, there was this big gathering, some 30,000 people, who came together, one of the leading conservative gatherings of the year, for Turning Point USA, the organization founded and led by the late and much lamented Charlie Kirk. But what's fascinating to me is if you look at America's two leading newspapers, which are the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal has a big headline, and the headline says, Kirk's empire lines up behind a Vance presidential campaign. And there is a nice picture of the vice president, J.D. Vance, embracing a smiling, happy Erica Kirk, the widow of Charlie Kirk. And then there's another article which goes into some different depths of what happened at the Turning Point USA conference. It says, Turning Point's yearly gathering exposes discord, insults amid rifts over conspiracies and anti-Semitism. And again, the idea that there was ever any anti-Semitic taint to Charlie Kirk is just not true. He was friendly and supportive toward Israel and toward Jewish people generally. Yes, he was a profound and deeply committed Christian, but he wasn't dangerous in the anti-Semitic aspect of things. And it says in the New York Times, since 2021, Turning Point USA's annual gathering, America Fest, has featured a star-studded roster of conservative influencers and politicians who have been virtually unified in their focus on a common foe, one that Charlie Kirk, the group's co-founder, called the woke left. But over the weekend in Phoenix, speakers at America Fest scarcely mentioned Democrats and other liberal foils. Instead, some of the most prominent right-wing leaders in the country criticized members of their own movement, calling them frauds, pompous, a cancer, and a worm. Yes. Driving the enmity have been some of the most explosive and unresolved issues confronting the MAGA movement: resurgent anti-Semitism, the prevalence of conspiracy theories, and the rise of the concept of heritage Americans, and what that notion, considered by some to be a thinly veiled racist dog whistle, means for non-white conservatives. Without Mr. Kirk, the movement's bold-faced names appear to be jockeying over the weekend to influence the direction of the MAGA movement at a time when the most towering figure, President Trump, is in his second term, and for some true believers, it was hard to watch. Okay, the highlight of the gathering was clearly the vice president and the chosen successor endorsed by Erica Kirk already. He was J.D. Vance. And J.D. Vance talked at first about the assassination of Charlie Kirk and his reaction to it. And here is what the vice president had to say. This is clip 16.
I'm going to tell you something I haven't talked about publicly before, but in the days after Charlie's death, I struggled a great deal. I'm sure many of you did too. I remember watching every video of the assassination, looking for clues, trying to understand what happened. I tried to hide my friend and that terrible bullet hitting him, but I would try to look around. I stayed up all night for many nights in a row, researching every conspiracy theory, going down every rabbit hole. When my lovely wife, Usha, told me to come to bed, I told her I owed it to Charlie to try to uncover every stone, and so that's what I tried to do. I remember I was consumed by this fear that Charlie's death wouldn't just deprive a family of their husband or of a good father, but that it would deny our movement of a great unifier of people and a great doer of great deeds. It's the only time I can remember my wife ever telling me that she was really worried about me. She told me it many times. But what saved me was not lying to myself, but accepting the reality of the fight that we're in.
Okay, and what does that mean? J.D. Vance goes on to explain his description of the fight that we're in. This is clip 11.
Small town family. He moved into a small apartment. He became addicted to porn. He became addicted to hate. And he ended up sleeping with somebody who doesn't know whether they're a man or a woman. That is the nightmare scenario, but that is the scenario that the left has actively advertised they want for American families. And the young men in the audience in particular. That is exactly why we have to fight them. Because the fruits of true Christianity are men like Charlie Kirk. The fruits of true Christianity are good husbands, patient fathers, builders of great things, and slayers of dragons. And yes, men who are willing to die for a principle if that's what God asks them to do. Because so many of us recognize that it is better to die a patriot than live a coward.
Okay, again, the description of people on the left, how do you make a compromise if you think, honestly, that the people on the left want you to be unhappy and corrupt and going to bed with someone where you don't know what sex they are? And again, there are all kinds of excesses on the left. But is it constructive to view them so much as evil? And then there was this statement, which has already provoked a certain amount of controversy. This by J.D. Vance, the Vice President of the United States, clip 8.
More than any time I can recount, people are talking about American identity and figuring out what it is that unites us. But I want to say something here. The only thing that is truly served as an anchor of the United States of America is that we have been, and by the grace of God, we always will be, a Christian nation. Now, I want to be explicit because, of course, the fake news media will twist everything that I say. I'm not saying you feel about them the same way I do. I'm not saying you have to be a Christian to be an American. I'm saying something simpler and truer. Christianity is America's creed. The shared moral language from the Revolution to the Civil War and beyond. Across that history, our country's major debates have always centered on how we could best as a people please God.
Okay, this has provoked some very real controversy, especially given the fact that he has even admitted that he is trying to persuade his wife to convert to Christianity. Her background is not Christian. She is from India. We will get to more of J.D. Vance and the things that are dividing the conservative movement outlets trying to hold on to power. That and more coming up in this greatest nation on God's green earth.